Let us now talk about the research question and hypothesis. Obviously, you have dealt with research question and hypothesis in your intro to research class, but here we are going to go into detail and make sure that it is clear, concise, measurable, and doable in any type of study that you use. So when you look at the qualitative research question, the qualitative research question would ask you one or two central questions. That means you have a broad question about an exploration. For example, you want to explore explore algebra teachers' self-efficacy of teaching. And so now this is like, or you want to explore the self-efficacy of teachers. So, but then the questions, then you're going to have sub-questions is you're going to look at algebra self-efficacy, in what context is, or in the teaching for 1 or 2 years, and else other things that you want to know. So there is a central question, and then you're also going to have several sub-questions. So this is very important. It obviously relates to a specific quality or strategy. It needs to relate to that. When you are reading this chapter 7 of your book, go to the section or go to the study type of study you are doing and thoroughly read that section of it so that you know what you're going to do. One of a very, very important part of this study is, of qualitative research question is that it begins, has words what and how. That is the word that is it. What is the relationship, or how is what is teachers' perspectives about so and so, or something like that, or how do women of color feel about something. So basically what you are, it is a more emerging theory. It is about finding out answers. It is focused on a single phenomena, but it has more exploratory verbs such as describe the essence of the experience, discover, seek to understand, explore a concept. Once again, you're going to use non-directional words because this is something that is emerging out of the study. So you're going to talk about non-directional words. Now, impact, influence, affect are all directional words. So those are more used in quantitative research study. So you cannot use impact. You cannot say what is the impact of what is the impact of coaching on students' learning, or something like that. You cannot use the word impact. You can talk about how does the coaching relate to students' progress, or something like that. So you have to make sure you are framing your question in a non-directional way. It is an open-ended question without reference to literature or theory. And so you are going to specify participants in the research question and the research site. However, it is more open-ended. So once again, on page number 135, you have a script for it. And if you look at the various examples that you are given, I'm going to use the example 7.2, which talks about how do women in psychology doctoral program describe their decision to return to school. So here, once again, the word is how. It starts with how, then it uses describe. So it is one of those exploratory words. You have woman in psychology doctoral program provides you the participants in the research study. And then you talk about a single phenomena or concept is their decision to return to school. So this is what is a very good qualitative research question. Now let's look at quantitative research question. So one of the big things is quantitative research question differs from qualitative research question in terms of talking about the inquiry or inquire the relationship among the variables. And you are also going to have the hypothesis in a quantitative research study, which is predictors that the researcher makes about the expected outcome of the relationships. So you see how it has gone from non-directional to directional, because now I'm doing this study because I am expecting that there is going to be some sort of a result. As you remember from your intro to research class, we have the null hypothesis, and we choose the null hypothesis in a way to reject the null hypothesis. And then we have the alternate hypothesis that is in line to what we expect the prediction to be. So this is what is basis of the quantitative research question. So here is another, you have the script on page number 137. What is the frequency and variation of scores on STAR test for fifth grade students, fifth grade, or math STAR test for fifth grade students in the study, or something like that? So you're looking at specifically what you're doing. So the use of variables is limited to 3 basic approaches. May compare groups on independent variables to see its impact on dependent variable. So for example, you are comparing groups would be like an experimental study, because what you're doing is one group gets it, the intervention or whatever you're doing, the other group doesn't get it. So you're comparing those groups. So that is the difference between. It could also relate one or more independent variables to one or more dependent variables. For example, that is a survey. You're doing a survey and you collect data on it, and then you correlate those data. So that is what is going. May also describe responses, and that would be a descriptive study. So if you are doing studies that are impactful, I know that especially educational leadership students have to do impactful studies. It needs to be either an experimental or a quasi-experimental study, and then it also needs to be, or it needs to be like a survey study. So those are the areas that you are going to be focused on. And once again, the most rigorous formal quantitative study follows from a test of a theory. So it is like logically flows from a relationship between the variables. Independent and dependent variables must be measured separately and do not measure the same concept. Then there is, if they measure the same concept, then it will be like 1 on a correlation scale, which is not possible. And so you write only research question or hypothesis, not both, unless the hypothesis build on the research question. So that is another point too. So if the hypothesis is used, like we were talking about, it is the null hypothesis, which is based on basically to reject the null hypothesis, and then an alternate hypothesis, which makes a prediction about the expected outcome. Another thing is you are going to use non-demographic variables such as attitudes or behaviors, and the pattern of choice and words to help guide the reader is given. Now let's look at an example of it. So let's talk about so for example, our quantitative research question says, what is the impact of participation in sports on students' overall GPA? So I know that participation in sports is my independent, and I'm looking at the impact and overall GPA. Now I can set it up as comparing groups or however, but if I'm looking at my null hypothesis would be something like there is no difference between, and whichever groups that I take is the group that is participating and group that is not participating. But my alternate hypothesis, now I can set my alternate hypothesis in 2 ways. I can set it as directional or non-directional. If I set it as directional, I would say that the mean of the participation of in sports has an impact on the GPA. So it is, the mean is more than the one that is not there. Or I can set it up as non-directional. So let us look at the examples from your book. So if you look at the null hypothesis on example 7.3, you said there is no significant difference between the effects of verbal clues, rewards, and no reinforcement in terms of social interaction for children. So you're looking at these variables, but there is no significant difference. But when you are looking at a directional hypothesis, you are talking about so this is for another null hypothesis which says there is no difference. You're going to say publicly traded firms will have higher growth rates than privately traded firms. So your null hypothesis would have been there is no difference in the public and private trading funds, but this has a higher growth. So this is again showing you or state-owned firms will have higher customer base ability than privately. So you're already saying that the public are better than the private. So that is directional. However, a non-directional hypothesis would be something like that is general. So your non-directional would be gender identity of religious and secular Arab and Jewish women are related to different. So you're saying there is a difference, but you don't know whether that is a positive difference or a negative difference. But when you look at H3 over there, that you already said the relationship among gender identity, religiosity, and social actions are weaker among Arab women than among Jewish women. So here you've made it a directional one because you've said this is weaker. Or you could just say are different among Arab women and Jewish women. If you say only different, then that is a non-directional one. So those are the things that you have to think about. Now, mixed methods research question and hypothesis is it has both qualitative and quantitative research questions or hypothesis that is needed for it. When writing, you follow the guidelines for scripting good questions and hypotheses. So there are guidelines for both qualitative and quantitative. So you have to follow both of them. Attention should also get, this is like, so when you are doing a mixed method, you're doing quantitative and qualitative. So it's like a two-phase. Either both the phases are happening simultaneously, or first phase questions will come first and the second phase questions will come first. So you have to be careful about how you do those. There are three forms of writing mixed methods questions: convey the methods or procedures, convey the content of the study, and convey the methods. The most ideal way to write this research question for a mixed method is you write them separately and then you are going to combine them. So like over here, you have a mixed method question on page number 144. So if you look at it, what differences currently exist? I am looking at example 7.8. What differences currently exist between the middle school instructional strategy and the junior high instructional strategy at the school in transition? So you're looking at the differences, which is more of qualitative. Now you're looking at the impact of it. How has this transition period impacted science attitude and achievement of your students? So now you're looking at transition period is your independent. So you're going to have different transition periods, and you're looking at the impact on science attitude and achievement. So you have two dependent variables here and one independent variable of looking at the transition period. So this is how a mixed method study is done. Once again, if you have, mixed methods research question is done. So once again, if you have any question, please don't hesitate to ask. I am here to support you guys and hope be successful in doing a measurable, doable study by the end of this semester. So let's talk more if need be.